Hey everyone, Brandon here with Galway Precision. Today we are going to go over the installation of our reduced power spring kit for Taurus Large Frame Revolvers. It will be listed on the website. All the different models of large frame revolver it will fit. No, it will not fit the Judge. No, it won't fit the Model 85. We will be working on spring kits for those as well though. This is the bootlegger before it has become the bootlegger. There's a lot of other stuff that's going to be done to it for the American Handgunner article, but we wanted to go ahead and get these up on the website for you guys that are very interested in making the pull on your 44 mag and other large frame Taurus revolvers much better. Alright, so we're going to go over tools you're going to need. You're going to need a 1/8 inch flathead. Alright, make sure it's 1/8 blade. We'll get into why when we get to taking everything apart. You'll need a pair of needle nose pliers, polymer hammer, you'll need your bench block, and you'll need a paper clip cut into a couple of different length pieces. Alright, so when we started this whole endeavor for Roy over at American Handgunner, it all started with him getting a lot of letters and emails from customers wanting to improve their revolvers. Nobody wants to mess with them. Hey, we'll gladly do that. So what we did, first thing we had developed were the springs. I took the stock springs out, sent them off. Now in this particular revolver, our starting double action pull was 10 pounds and our single action pull was 6, which is actually pretty good for a revolver, but we wanted to go a little lighter for what we have planned for this one. And so we did a 20% reduction of the spring weight, and when we got these back, the single action pull in the M44 here went down. The single action went from 6 to about 3.5, and then the double action went from 10 to 6.5. So you're looking at, depending on the tolerances of your revolver, how worn in it is, if it's ever had stone and polish trigger job done to it on the inside or anything like that, you're going to see between a 2.5 to 4 pound decrease in the double action and single action pull weight on your large frame revolver. So it's a very big improvement. I'll see if I can dig up the Instagram post. We'll get it put in at the end of the video or something, or we'll just do a secondary video, but this is going to cover the install. Alright, so let's go ahead and open up the cylinder, make sure we are unloaded, and we are ready to begin. So we're going to start, one note before we get to this actually. I have here, if you have a 6.5 inch model or you have one of the models with the red back strap, alright, the recoil reducing strap, you have a different style grip on the frame. Yours is going to be this style, and it's going to have an Allen wrench Allen screw that screws in from the bottom. In your box that you came with your revolver, you will have the correct Allen wrench. Alright, so you'll need that instead of a screwdriver. Outside of that, everything else is going to be the same. So let's go ahead and get started. Now that we know the difference between the two, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll take our 1/8 inch screwdriver. What I like to do when I do this portion, since I'm not going to need the grip panels immediately, and so I don't lose anything, I just go ahead and put them back together, give the screw 1 or 2 turns so it just grabs the other side, and I set them off to the side. Alright, so now what you're going to do is you're going to take your longer piece of your paper clip, go ahead and cock the hammer, and you see this hole in your hammer strut, go ahead and this is why I fold it at a 90 degree so that I can lay it in here, and then I'm going to decock the hammer. What this does is take pressure off the spring so we can pull the hammer strut out. We're going to set that off to the side for now. And if you want to, you can go ahead and actually, change your springs out. This is one of ours, so it's not going to be under as much tension. Yours is going to be under a ton of tension. So when you do this, sometimes the easiest way to do it is take and set the plate across the hole on the back side of your bench block, push down on it, and pull that out at the same time. The other thing you can do is to keep it there, take your needle nose, work it out so that way it's got somewhere to go down instead of shooting up. Alright, and then you can take your old spring, put it in the bag your new springs came in, set it off to the side. Then you take your new spring, and you'll see wear marks. You should anyway. And what this is it's showing you how it seats in here, how it normally sits. And that's how it goes. Notice you got the rounded part and the oil stain right there. That's where the spring sits. And then where it's slammed into the pocket from firing, so that you know it goes that way. So in case you get confused and you're looking for markings and you really don't see any, flat side, let me throw that over there somewhere. Flat side will always go up. The more rounded edges will always go down. Okay, so make sure that when you're putting this back together, you're thinking in orientation to the hammer, not orientation to this, because if you just put this on and slap it on there, you may put it on wrong. So I'll stick that on, compress, push that down, and then we'll take our paper clip. Once we have it compressed past the hole, insert your clip just like that. It'll grab it. Your hammer strut's ready. Alright, so let's go ahead and take the side panel off. It does not matter what order you take these off in. However, when you get to the front one, this screw is what holds the cylinder in place and also keeps pressure on the pawl and the front end of the trigger. Well, not really the trigger, just the pawl, but we'll get into that. We'll show you how to pull all that apart. When you go to pull yours apart, your flattest, you notice this one's a little bit flatter. It's almost hard to make out, but one will be flatter than the other. Your flattest one will always go in the furthest back. Your rounded will go here. And then this little guy right here is its own sort of fun. All right, now notice the inside isn't in there. All right, it's actually got a detent and a spring. So if they don't come out, make sure you pick it up, tilt your hand over, because that spring is super duper tiny. Very easy to lose that and the plunger. And that actually sits inside and puts pressure on the arm for the cylinder. Now, we'll take our bench block. We're going to set at an angle, a revolver on it. We're going to tap with the palm or hammer, and you'll see the panel, your side plate will start coming off. Don't go prying on this thing, and I'll show you why. Just tap it, and it'll come right out. Reason you don't want to pry on it, that right there. You start going to prying on this thing, trying to get it off, you can easily get this off just barely a thousandth of an inch. You mess this piece up, this is what locks it in other than the screws. Your plate won't stay or it won't come off. Those are going to be your two options. We don't want either of those. So make sure you don't pry. You just tap all around the grip and this thing will come off. Alright, so now we're done with our bench block. We can set it off to the side. Go ahead and open the cylinder. And you're just going to pull that bad boy out the front. Now, your cylinder inside the crane here, you're going to have in the crane arm a plunger and a spring. The spring probably won't come out. If it does, no big deal. But the plunger, alright, it should come out as one unit. Again, this thing's been pulled apart about 1,000,000 times for testing and drawings and everything. But if it all comes out, it just goes right back in. Just make sure it stays in the arm for the cylinder. Set that off to the side. Alright, now what you're going to do is you're going to kind of pull the trigger a little bit, enough to slide the hammer out. Next, we're going to take our screwdriver, we're going to push back on the lifter here. That's for what grabs into the back on this side right here, the little star. That's what hits and turns the cylinder. Now, there's a piece on here that is under spring tension, so when you pull this out, you're going to have a little arm pop out the back. No big deal, because what we're going to do next, if it decides to cooperate, once we have that pressure off, you can actually move this forward and your trigger return spring and rod will come out. Go ahead and pull this out next. We're going to go ahead and change this spring. So you can pull that spring off, take your new spring and put it on, and you'll notice you got one hole bigger, one hole that's countersunk. You're going to go to the countersunk hole and push that down, and you'll notice there's a hole in the strut too, right there. Guess what we're going to do? Push this down, stick our little piece of paper clip in there, so it's all ready to go. Okay, so now we are ready to go. If you wanted to at this point, you could go ahead and pull the trigger out. You could polish this area. You could polish your blocker, which is what this is. It actually blocks the firing pin when you cock it, so in case something does break, say for whatever reason back of the trigger breaks off, hammer goes to slam forward, well, can't go anywhere, can't hit the firing pin because this is blocking it. Okay, alright, so polish that, polish your internals, and go ahead and get ready to put everything back in. Now you don't need to pull your pawl out. The only reason we took the cylinder off was to get pressure off it so we can manipulate the trigger enough. You go to take this apart, be very cognizant of the fact you've got this plunger and spring set that are inside the trigger. That's something else we're working on. We've got the other trigger sent off for 3D scanning so that we can have a base to start off for developing some target triggers for these. Alright, so make sure that it's all one unit, goes back in. Now the easiest way to start putting things back together is we'll start with our blocker. We'll put our trigger back in, and the blocker, firing pin block arm, or whatever they call it in the manual, is going to go in this hole, just like so. So literally you can just kind of set it in its cavity, line it up with the hole on the trigger, seat it all home. Next, we're going to take our lifter, and you can see that little piece is sticking out. So what you're going to do, notice there are two different lengths. You're going to push in with the longer rod first. I get my fat fingers in the way of everything. Alright, come in from behind, use the longer one to push it in. Then once you get to where you're going, you can literally just seat the small arm down in that hole and you're golden. The spring pressure pushing back on this will force the lifter forward. It goes into its cavity. Done. So now we're ready to put our trigger return spring back in. Now, best way to do this, now that we have this all back together, is on the back of the trigger. Well, you can see this here if I can get this thing to cooperate a little bit, and it's not got any spring tension on it. It's a pain in the butt. You'll see right here there'll be a ball cutout that is the exact size of that rod. So we're going to start by placing this little assembly right in its hole right there. Alright, once that's all lined up, you're going to have to push it down on there, which is why we use the paper clips instead, because you can get them, they'll move right out of the way. Once you get everything lined up, pull your trigger all the way to the rear. like that. Hold this in place, and we're just going to pull that right on out. If it misses, you can actually push forward and start all over again. This is the trickiest part of the whole thing because it's not got quite the distance to completely go up in there the way it normally would. And it does that stock too. Because I thought, oh man, these are short. No, put the stock ones back in, it did the same thing. So it's all kind of a balancing act. I also don't suggest doing this at the end of the day when your fingers are tired from compressing things all day. Just throwing that out there. Hopeful hint. Oh man. One more time. We'll get it this time. I need to develop a tool for this is what I need to do. But I was taught old school, so I do it all old school by hand. This is one of those times I wish I didn't have to. Alright, so that's back in. We'll turn that. Get it all lined up. There. Turn. Hold that up and just right on out. Alright, and this time we sat perfectly where we should. As I knock the camera around, but you can see it's seated. Alright, so we're ready to move on to the next step. Go ahead and take your cylinder. This part's also tricky because this little guy likes to pop out. Put it in, get it all lined up, and you'll see the plunger push up against the pawl. Go ahead and close your cylinder, and that'll keep everything in place. We're ready to move on to the hammer. Go ahead and you're going to cock your trigger a little bit so it lines up with the sear of the hammer. There we go. All right. Now we're ready to put our side panel back on. So we're going to start by taking that piece we talked about earlier, starting it first. When we go to do it at first and it doesn't go in, make sure that your hammer is actually all the way down. Everything's installed and looking good. And once we get it all up in there like that, we're just gonna gentle taps with our polymer hammer till it seats. And the first one we're gonna put back in, making sure that our detent and springs stay in the sleeve, is the screw that holds in the crane for the cylinder. All right. And guys, you don't really need to go crazy on these. Hand tight, okay? Don't sit here and crank on it until you start walling out the screws, which is also why you need to make sure you use the right size screwdriver, because these screws will wallow out very easily, and the moment you do, you're not getting this thing out without sending it to someone like us or back to Taurus themselves. And that can cost mucho bucks. All right. We are ready to put our hammer strut assembly back in. You'll find your pocket, lay it in there, cock the hammer back, pull out your piece of paper clip, drop the hammer. You're ready to put your grips on and you're done. You're ready to put it up in the vise and get you some trigger readings. Pull this back apart. Now this does have a knurled side so that it stays in place and doesn't drive all the way through the frame. Another reason I just leave it in there. If yours does not stay in the grip, just whichever side the knurling's on, put it back the same way. And that's it, guys. You're done. You have installed the reduced power spring kit, and you are ready to drop your pull weight by 2.5 to 4 pounds, depending on your pistol, revolver. Sorry. And that's it, guys. That's going to wrap that one up. A little trickier, a lot more moving parts inside of a revolver, if I can say all the words correctly. But man, the difference that this set makes is just tremendous. I think I think a lot of you that get this are going to be very pleased with the end outcome, and I'm just glad to be doing revolver work, honestly. It's one of the few things I cut my teeth on when I was younger, and it's nice to delve back into it. There's always the nostalgia of a revolver. And it doesn't matter how Instagram operator you are, how high speed. In the end, anytime you pick up a 6-gun, you immediately just start. Can't help it. They're fun. This is actually for a 44 mag. It's got the right weight to it, good feel, good defensive gun. For me, it'd be too big to carry. For some of you, though, it's probably a pocket pistol. But for competition, hunting, whatever, great gun. Huge difference with the spring kit. Definitely worth the time and the investment. If you got any questions, feel free to email me at that's Tango Echo Charlie Hotel at GalwayPrecision.com. Be sure to follow us on social media here on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Gunstreamer, and Vimeo. And as always, be safe, be accurate, and God bless.